Hey everybody, welcome to The Story. Dan is off this week. He'll be back next week. And for now, I'm Maggie Vespa, and we just want to say first and foremost, we are here listening. We're always listening, but now more than ever. This moment, this past week, has been one of historic reckoning. And we here at KGW are doing our best to document it, to put it in context, and most importantly, we feel to elevate other voices who have context and have information and have perspective to offer. So if you have something to say, reach out on social media. Use the hashtag HeyDan. We're still checking that. You can email thestory@kgw.com. And I really want to emphasize this. If you know of someone who you think that we should talk to, a voice that we should be including in our coverage that you haven't heard yet, send us that too, because frankly, we'd appreciate the help. And with that, let's start the show. For the second time this year, the world has changed, and it took 1 week, a week that has felt far longer. So on this Monday, after so much chaos, we thought it best to kind of start by resetting and sort of walking you through what a difference a week has made, starting with last Monday. And that was when, well, most of Oregon was enjoying its first taste of that sort of phase 1 freedom from the coronavirus pandemic. A white police officer named Derek Chauvin pressed his knee into the throat of a black man named George Floyd for nearly 9 minutes. 3 other officers helped hold Floyd down. He lost consciousness in those 9 minutes, and he died. The whole thing was caught on camera. That, on the left, as you can see, is a still image from the video now seen around the world. In his last moments, Floyd begged to be released. He said he can't breathe, and he called out for his mom. Now, despite the fact that that was all caught on camera, no one was arrested, charged, or even fired that day. And a reminder, the entire ordeal started with a call to police that Floyd had tried to use a counterfeit 20 to buy cigarettes. So that was last Monday. The next day, Tuesday, protests started in Minneapolis, and by that afternoon, it was announced that 4 of the four officers had been fired. Wednesday, a day later, protests ballooned, expanding into other cities. And in Minneapolis, they grew from crowds of hundreds to tens of thousands. Still no charges against the now former officers. Thursday, same story, no charges. And that night, rage hit a boiling point in Minneapolis when rioters stormed major sections of the city and lit a police precinct, among other buildings, on fire. Friday, an announcement. Former Officer Chauvin, the one who knelt on Floyd's neck, is charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. The other former officers, nothing, no charges. Now that night, rage spilled over into dozens and dozens of other cities across the U.S., sparking more peaceful protests, yes, but also violent riots that lasted throughout the weekend. Cities have declared states of emergency. Governors have called in the National Guard. And for the first time since 9/11, the Secret Service rushed leaders in the White House into an underground bunker, including, yes, President Trump. It took just 1 week to send a country into chaos, albeit 1 week after centuries of racism, violence, and pain. So our big story is about the protests, some of which have turned into riots. But obviously what's happening is about way more than 1 black man and 1 white cop. It's about way more than protests and riots and looters and curfews and videos of police brutality and videos of police restraint. It is about all of that, and that's a lot. That's more than we could ever hope to cover in 30 minutes. So we're going to do our best to sort of bite off an Oregon and Southwest Washington-sized chunk of that story and try to make some sense of it here. And to begin, we think it's best distilled down to one question. How do you police a protest against police? Because even when things start objectively peaceful, like they did yesterday in Portland with officers and protesters kneeling together in solidarity, the fact is a lot of those protesters are there to protest the very people paid to keep them in line. Now, the governor's answer appears to be in line with the president's answer, at least to some degree. Send in the National Guard, which she said will do for the first time in decades. We've heard from some of you who feel like this is akin to trying to put out a fire with more fire. And if that's the case, then the president definitely fired a flamethrower a couple of hours ago.
As we speak, I am dispatching thousands and thousands of heavily armed soldiers, military personnel, and law enforcement officers to stop the rioting looting, vandalism, assaults, and the wanton destruction of property.
And during those same remarks, the president suggested, with no evidence, that some of the rioters are coming in from out of state. They're part of left-wing groups. Well, in fact, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler floated a version of the same theory on MSNBC last night, minus the politics.
Tonight, we took an unusual step in closing off on-ramps into the city of Portland because we heard anecdotally that some of the demonstrators were coming from outside of our city.
So we raised an eyebrow at the word anecdotally because, remember, Portland is no stranger to demonstrations, including violent ones, often populated by Washington-based Patriot Prayer. They literally come to town on buses, and predictable chaos has ensued. But trying to stop them from coming to town? That we haven't seen. And it's worth noting this theory that the mayor floated on national TV is being repeated across the country. Minnesota's governor actually last week famously estimated 80% of protesters in the Minneapolis area were, quote, out-of-state agitators. And then yesterday, he walked that back, saying he subconsciously may have been wanting to believe that because it would have sort of made the riots not a Minnesota problem. Now, that said, our mayor said it on national TV, and he used the word anecdotally, but he still said it. And then he closed off on-ramps because of it. So to what degree can we or officials know where protesters are coming from? Kristen Severance has been looking into where some of the protesters are coming from. And Kristen, I say some because there are thousands of people out there the last few days.
Exactly, Maggie. There were thousands of people there. No way to truly know where these people live and if they live out of town unless they were arrested. Then their addresses become public record and we can check it. So that's what I've been doing all day, looking up court records to see if any of the people arrested at the demonstrations were from out of state or out of the area. According to Portland police, 75 people were arrested at the demonstration since Friday. More than half of those arrests, though, they were not yet entered in the court system. So those records were not available. But for the records that were available, that we were able to access, 25 people listed addresses as Portland, Beaverton, or Vancouver. 6 were listed as transit or homeless, and just 2 of those arrests have addresses that were truly out of town. And that's 32-year-old William Isham. He's from Roseburg. He was cited for interfering with a peace officer, disorderly conduct, and curfew. And then only 1 out-of-state arrest based on those public records, and that's 31-year-old Clayton Eiseman of Richmond, California. He was arrested for those same things. And, you know, while we keep hearing from city officials that out-of-towners are causing issues, Deputy Chief Chris Davis said today, you know, it's too early. It's too soon to tell.
It's a little too early to tell. You know, we have made a large number of arrests, but that number of arrests is a small fraction of the people who've been involved in criminal activity. And, you know, one of the realities of living in a large metro area is that people come and go from cities where they don't live all the time. So it's much too early in the investigation to tell the distribution of where people are from who are engaged in criminal activity.
You know, we're going to keep checking on these records as they become available to get a better idea, you know, of where these people live and if any are truly coming from outside of the area. Maggie.
We were talking about this earlier, right? And like, why does it matter to a degree if they're from here or they're from out of town? Why is there such an emphasis, do we know, on out-of-towners, whether they're the ones causing trouble?
Right. It's such a good question. I mean, we heard, you said, the governor of Minnesota said, you know, it kind of made him feel better to think it was outsiders causing this. You know, he could blame it on this outside group, but that wasn't the case. And, you know, he had to walk that back. So, you know, we'll just have to keep waiting on some of these public records to see if it's really happening here. You know, it's tough because you can't just go around and poll every single person. Hey, do you live here? Do you not live here? So you really have to rely on public records, and it is such a small fraction. I mean, thousands of people since Friday have been there, and we only have, you know, the records for 75 people, but at least it gives us, you know, some slice of really where people are from.
Definitely, and we understand that, you know, officials are trying to gauge resources, what they have versus what they need. But this is a conversation that's happening across the country, and seems like a lot of different motivations there. Kristen Severance live for us. Kristen, thank you so much. So now we look ahead to the coming days. There will almost certainly be more protests. They will almost certainly, from what we're hearing, lead to more, potentially, of what we saw over the past few days in Portland and elsewhere. Like we mentioned, we now know the National Guard will be involved. Governor Brown and Portland Commissioner Joanne Hardesty spoke to the media together earlier today about that decision. And Hardesty actually said initially she opposed the idea, but then she explained how she came around.
When the governor first called me and mentioned National Guard, I was no, right? It's like it was just the immediate response. And then I talked to my police chief, who says, I have folks who have been working almost 24 hours, 3 days in a row. I think we can all agree having tired police officers on the street doesn't benefit the public, and it certainly doesn't benefit the public employees who are sworn to protect and serve.
So we mentioned President Trump's big push for governors to take this action. We learned the president tore into governors across America over the phone this morning before this address tonight. An audio of that conversation leaked this morning. We have not obtained it, but other outlets have. The president told governors, quote, you have to dominate. If you don't dominate, you're wasting your time. They're going to run over you. You're going to look like a bunch of jerks. Actual quote from President Trump. Granted, it's been a long few nights at the White House, too. I mean, there are normally protests outside the gates, but they rarely end with fires being started, smoke filling the skies of D.C. And they, again, as we said, have almost never in history ended with the president being taken down into the White House bunker, several stories underground. That happened on Friday. So we'll just have to wait and see if sending in the National Guard keeps the peace or just fans the flames. And to give you an idea of how rare it is for Oregon to activate the National Guard, the last time this happened was to assist authorities across the country. Guard members actually went to New Orleans to patrol streets of the 9th Ward after Hurricane Katrina. But to take it back even farther, the last time the National Guard was activated in Oregon was for civil unrest in 1984 to help against the Rajneeshis cult members in Antelope, Oregon. Remember that little Netflix documentary, Wild Wild Country, that put Antelope on the map? Yeah, we're talking about that. It's a huge step that the governor is taking, seemingly in line with the president's demands this morning. All right, so all that in mind, we want to stop and draw a hard line here, and it's one that we've been working to draw all weekend, because when we talk about policing and we talk about the National Guard and we talk about the president's comments, we are talking about riots. But a lot of people involved in peaceful protests this weekend say the riots are not in line with their message. And that includes local activist Dre Miller. He went to Friday evening's rally with his son and his daughter, and they watched it turn from peaceful to violent. It's a shift that they blame on outside groups with their own agendas.
This is my daughter right here, man. I'm doing it for my kids. I'm doing it for the ancestors that died for me to have this right to be able to do it. And I'm doing it for the people after me. That's why I'm out here protesting and I'm marching and I'm out here trying to do everything that's right for the community.
The first couple hours, we're just like talking about people's stories and like what they've been through and everything. And then after that was all over, we did a protest, which, like my dad said, it was very peaceful until we got to like MLK and people started like breaking in to like buildings, writing graffiti. But it's just like, I don't know, if we don't make a change right now and like have people understand where we're coming from, there's just not going to be a change at all.
They've started the Chase Bank on fire.
I think that these different separate groups have their own agenda, and they're using the opportunity to push their agenda. That's not our agenda. Our agenda right now is basically the same thing that we've been saying. I made this shirt when Eric Garner got murdered. We've been saying the same thing. We want them to stop killing us. We want cops to stop killing unarmed black men.
All these other groups trying to push their own agendas, it creates a lot of noise around what we're trying to do. So it kind of overshadows, the message that we're trying to bring, and it can be a little bit frustrating because we don't want, these protests to be remembered as violence, We want these protests to be remembered for the reason why we're out there. To combat racism, to plead for justice, to plead for equality.
It's just frustrating because we're not heard as much as other communities, and we need to be heard. Like, we need to be heard by other people just to get our, just to show that we matter also.
I fear for my sons when they go home, or when they go to the store and they go to school. I fear for them. I fear for myself. Like, it's a real fear that I have. It's an anxiety that I have.
All right, so some final words on what we've seen the last few days. Today is June 1st. It's the first of the month, obviously, and that's taken on a lot of power in the last few months because rent and mortgages are due, and a historic number of people have been out of work, unable to pay due to the pandemic. That will certainly be an issue this month, too. But this day also carries a very different weight. It's the first day of Pride Month. And while lately Pride has become a time for parties, parades, and corporate branded rainbow merchandise, it's far from how it began, because it began with a riot on the streets of New York and a tiny bar called the Stonewall Inn. Back before marriage equality, back before Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, back before there were any LGBTQ characters on TV, let alone in leadership roles. And fed up with police raiding their bars, one of the few places that LGBTQ people actually did feel like they could be themselves, they rose up and they rioted, led in large part by trans people of color. The Stonewall riots paved the way for the freedoms that LGBTQ people have today. Those riots were no party, and they are a reminder that sometimes a riot can be a turning point, one that leads later to celebrations and, yes, parades. And we do want to update you on the story that our crews have been following throughout the night. We should say there is already a large group of about 100 protesters in downtown Portland tonight and another group in southeast Portland. So we're monitoring that. It's not over yet. We'll have a lot more for you on the news at 6:30.
Nobody condones the violence. Nobody that I know condones the violence. A lot of people understand it, but you can't condone that violence. But what you can do is focus on what is the cause of the violence. It was the injustice. So focus on solving that, and the violence will take care of itself.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Story. I'm Maggie Vespa. I'm in for Dan this week, but don't freak out. He's just spending some time with his family. And as you can tell, it's still the same show. It's still the same platform. We want to hear from you. So email the story at kgw.com, or you can reach out on social media. The hashtag is still HeyDan, so you can see not that much has changed. And hey, we're going to take a break from the protests for a minute because we are still dealing with a pandemic and a huge economic collapse. Those things haven't stopped. And we have heard from so many of you about your struggles to get unemployment. Well, now the state of Oregon is making some changes. Over the weekend, Governor Kate Brown fired the state employment director, Kay Erickson, after Senator Ron Wyden said she needed to resign. She's gotten a lot of criticism for the backlog of 32,000 unemployment claims. The agency has blamed this on their outdated computer system, which we've covered. So now this guy, David Gerstenfeld, is taking over as interim employment director, and his first order of business was testifying before a Senate committee hearing this morning.
I think the biggest area where we've struggled more than many other states is with that communication, with people being able to get in touch with us to know the status of their claim, and to know what's coming next. And that is something that we're really focused on addressing right now.
Yeah, safe to say that's been the big issue. The Employment Department has also launched something called Project Focus 100, and the goal is to process 100% of the backlogged claims as soon as possible. We hope that was the goal all along. And then hire, as part of that, hundreds more employees to handle claims and those phone calls. So stay tuned and we'll stay on it. And while we're talking about the economy, we should mention that Washington County began reopening today. And that means Multnomah County is the only one in the state that is still shut down right now. Now, we checked in with some businesses in Beaverton today. And honestly, a lot of them told us for the first day of phase 1, business is pretty good.
Our clients are fired up to be here. They're fired up to be here. They're fired up to get their haircuts. They're really excited. People are coming in just very giddy to get their haircut.
Excited, especially on a nice day like this. Our patio is almost full right now, and everyone chooses to sit outside today.
All right, so a refresher here. Under phase 1, sit-down service is allowed at restaurants and bars with small groups and tables 6 feet apart. You have to make appointments, as excited as everyone is, as that guy said, at all barbers, salons, and massage businesses. You can't just walk in. And gyms can reopen too, but with more social distancing and sanitation requirements. So things are kind of ramped up. And by the way, Multnomah County plans to apply for phase 1 this week, and they'd like to start reopening on June 12th.
And we are looking at some fantastic conditions out there. Not just today, not just tomorrow, but the entire first week of June is looking pretty good. I should say the first work week of June. Heading into the weekend, we'll be seeing some changes. I'll show you that in a quick second. But right now, we're looking at temperatures up and down the Oregon coastline, right around the upper 50s, low 60s. Obviously, a little cooler along the beaches, but you're seeing a lot of blue skies out there, and that's going to be kind of the trend heading into the next couple of days as well. So the first week of June, basically sunny and nice and very pleasant. Daytime highs will be right around the low to mid 70s here the next few days. Dry all week, and temperatures are going to be very comfortable, but showers return potentially as early as late Friday, but I think for the most part, we'll be seeing dry conditions all day on Friday as well. The other thing we're kind of celebrating, at least for the meteorologist, is that today marks the meteorological summer. It started today. It goes from June, July, and August, of course. It's based on annual temperature cycles, and of course the astronomical summer arrives on June 20th at 2:44 in the afternoon, to be exact. So just a couple of weeks away from ushering in a new season. I think a lot of people are looking forward to summer. I know I am. Looking at the forecast right now, we're looking at temperatures in the low 70s. That was the high for earlier this afternoon, really throughout much of the metro area. East side of the state, the Dalles, you got into the mid to the upper 70s, and it's going to be just as nice heading into tomorrow. On the satellite and radar, not a whole lot is going to be popping up there, and that's going to be the case the entire week. Now, there is a little bit of some increasing clouds throughout the central and east side of the state with some showers, the potential of seeing more thunderstorms out there tonight, but after we get past tonight, things are going to be pretty quiet. Right now, we're looking at a temperature of 72 degrees from our Rose City camera with a lot of sunshine out there. And we're going to be seeing more of that sunshine over the next couple of days, Maggie. Daytime high tomorrow of 77 basically stays just as nice the entire week.
All right, Joe, as you know, we haven't been able to see each other for a while. None of us have here at KGW, so I'm just glad to see you, and I'm glad to see the kind of weather that we're all looking forward to.
Exactly. I think a lot of people feel the same way.
All right. Sounds good. Joe, thanks so much. Well, hey, guys, it's been a solemn show aside from that light moment. So there's a lot to talk about. Pick up your phone, use the hashtag HeyDan, leave us a comment, send in your input. We want to read some of your thoughts after the break when we finish the story.
So this is not about one killing or one moment or where we are today. If you really want to help understand and change a system that we have been living in since the day we got here, see the world through our eyes.
Hey everybody, welcome back. So Maggie Vespa in for the story. I'm blocking the title. Here I go over here. Once again, it has been a very solemn show, and we're sifting through your comments and through your emails now. We've gotten some questions. I know I saw one earlier about some of the things that we've seen graffitied all over downtown. We're going to answer that question via email and post it on our social media channels. One person sent in on Twitter, "Hey Dan, I wish reporters would not confuse protesters with criminals. Most of those who are involved in the violence are not there for George Floyd, though some of them may get caught up in it. By the way, where is the police chief?" So the police chief was on just to answer that part of it, a mandatory furlough because of the pandemic last week. She was back this morning, and they've had an acting chief in her place since then. As far as confusing the protesters with the criminals, absolutely. Some of the people who have been arrested could have started off as protesters. Police say that they committed crimes that they had to be arrested for at some point during the night. We're following it as best we can. And those are the people that we're reporting on, and specifically reporting on what they are being charged with at this point. But we actually are doing our very best not to conflate protesters, criminals, and rioters. Let us know if you think we can do a better job and how. Thank you so much for watching the story. We'll see you back here tomorrow.